Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Christian and I'm a member of Onlife and I'm with the CEO, Ryan Mullins. So we're just starting a podcast here just to talk about Onlife and to get you guys more familiar with it. And you ready to dive in, Ryan?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Let's do it. So the first question I really wanted to ask you, that I think a lot of people would like to know, just to get to know you and understand us, is what inspired you on a personal level to create Onlife? Because in my experience, many digital tools keep me and the rest of my youth glued to our screens, and we're constantly on the phones and trying to escape, but it seems to be it has a clutch on us. And
Yep.
from the outside, it seems like On Life takes a different approach to that. And On Life actually gives you the ability to live your life instead of being counterintuitive to that, where pushing you back onto the phone. So
Yeah.
what inspired you to create that?
Yeah. No, it's a good way to frame it. Well, there's a lot in a name. I'll say that, right? So, as the saying goes, like Shakespeare, right? Like, what's in a name? And the name On Life is contains worlds because what I'm trying to do, to your point, is it seems as though what has happened is that society has, you know, pretty drastically or significantly over-indexed on the digital, right? Is that we've sort of given over the organizing principle of our lives and reality to a number of different digital platforms. And so as a result, we're kind of all stuck doing, the thumb dance, on the phone for 6, 7 hours a day. And there's a lot of stuff. I mean, Jonathan Haidt's work that's come out recently, the anxious generation, and a lot of people have rallied behind him. And I think that the studies and stuff on that aren't like perfect or something, but I think it's pretty hard, in my opinion, to ignore the correlations between um, the mental health degradation, loneliness, feelings of alienation, feelings of overwhelm, and the emergence, around 2011, 2012, really when everything went more mobile of, Facebook, Instagram, um, and other social media kind of feed based products. And so I'm sure a lot of people watching will remember The Social Dilemma. There's a documentary that came out. I can't exactly remember when, maybe 2013 or 14. And it was a documentary on Netflix, I think, and it was uh, produced, and a lot of the people who starred in the documentary were former product leaders and builders, product managers at Instagram, at TikTok, at Facebook, and um, obviously they are now like feeling guilty and like shame for all the stuff that they created,
Mm.
and everyone again sort of rallied around this idea that like, hey, there's something wrong with how we've designed technology. There's some digital technology. There's something we've optimized. What we're optimizing for in these platforms, there's something wrong with them. And everyone thought that this was great, and I largely agree with that. But what I did not agree with was the fact that they didn't tell us anything about, well, how do we design it then? You know, it's one thing to say things like, well, these digital platforms are promoting misinformation, and we live in like a post-truth time. But then if you don't, you're just presupposing that what truth is.
Mm.
And as we know, if you're interested in philosophy, you know that this is quite a contentious debate that goes back quite a while. What is truth? What is knowledge? And so just saying that there's misinformation and just saying that we live in a post-truth time doesn't really solve much of anything. It's pretty trivial to say that, like, of course. But how were you able to adjudicate, what's information and what's misinformation? And I think the same is true here, where we have these platforms, and it's like, well, you can say that they're designed poorly, but you can only say they're designed poorly if you're kind of presupposing that you know how we should design them.
Mm.
So at least go with some skin in the game and tell us what you think or how you think we should go about designing products. And so OnLife was kind of taking up that challenge of seeing that what's very obviously true about humanity today is that we do not live online or offline anymore. This distinction is like, it's like asking, if you ask somebody how much time do you spend online, it's like asking, what does 11 smell like? It's just kind of like a nonsense question. And so for me, it was, we don't live online or offline, we live on life. We're just kind of in computation, whether we like it or not. And the core challenge for all of us who build businesses in this and learning from the lessons of the last couple of decades is, well, how do we then go about designing technology that helps human beings flourish? And for me, what I'm interested in is trying to figure out, I don't want to turn reality into something we all watch on the screen.
Mhm.
So the kind of the feed being sort of the thing in the middle between you and the world. What
Mhm.
I'm interested in is how do we design technology that sort of opens me up to engagement with the world? And I do think to some degree, the products obviously do that. But I think what gets in the way is the interface. So OnLife is about trying to rethink the core interfaces that we design, right? And I think we underestimate the extent to which how we design these interfaces radically impacts how we relate to other people, how we relate to ourselves, and how we relate to the world. And the problem here is sort of a matrix problem, right? Of like we're mistaking the map for the territory. We're reducing the world to the real estate of the screen.
Mhm.
And I think I'm a bit older than you, but I think your generation is very unique in that it seems like you guys, your generation's starting to realize that, hey, this isn't all good,
Yeah.
right? And therefore, I think you see a lot of, like in my time, not everybody got their passport. It wasn't like a given. You're seeing people traveling in the world and hiking and falling in love with nature again, or forming reading groups in real life, and
Yeah.
those types of things. It's like, how do you engage with the world? So, in summary, what drove me to create this was my own interest in philosophy and technology, and having a particular worldview on what it means to be human. And part of what I think it means to be human is I do not think that over here are humans, over here is technology, and over here is the world as these kind of three separate things. Instead, I think that what makes us human at all is the fact that we are technological.
Mhm.
You know, tool use is part of what made us human,
Yeah.
right? And so I think it's a mistake to then say like, well, do we just kind of like go full offline and go live in the woods or something? Or the other side is, do we go full on and upload ourselves to the internet? Kind of the Ray Kurzweil or the Ted Kaczynski, to the K spectrum, Kaczynski on this side and Kurzweil here. And, Kaczynski is not against technology. He was against digital technology. He still built a house. He still had to hunt for food. Obviously unfortunately, built bombs, used the postal system. He used writing materials. So this idea that there's like technology bad, nature good, I think is a very unfortunate simplification. So we are always already in a technological world. And the question is about design. How do we go about designing it in a way that helps humans flourish in their engagement with the world? And how do we use new technologies like generative AI? Um, how do we use those types of technologies to help build up agency, help build up autonomy, right? And help us be more human, not replacing humanity, not reducing agency, not reducing autonomy. And so that's the opportunity that I see is with a lot of these new emerging technologies is we need to sort of re-educate ourselves, and we have to get real about the fact that maybe we should stop. Not that the big tech companies aren't, completely innocent, obviously, but we have to get real about ourselves that it's our responsibility to you know, um, perform the necessary um, kind of defense against the dark arts a little bit.
Yeah.
We have to have our own um, MMA. We got to learn how to defend ourselves from um, uh, being completely unified with the principles of each of these platforms.
Yeah.
So it's a long-winded way of saying it. I hope I'm not losing anybody, but it's basically of like, I think the core opportunity at the moment, the coolest opportunity right now is trying to figure out how we can design products that help human beings flourish, that augment human abilities, not replace them. And it seems like should have learned a lot from the mistakes that have been made the last couple of decades. And I'm not a nihilist in thinking that, we're just going to create something and by default it's going to fail. I think we need to stop rambling and complaining and talking about it. We just have to try to build an alternative. We have to try. Otherwise, what are we doing? So
Yeah.
like it may very well be that there's some kind of, product entropy, and whatever it is that we build just kind of degrades into, boring least common denominator or something. But like we have to try nonetheless. And that's what On Life is about, is trying to help us be on top of life. How do we live every day and feel like when our head hits the pillow, like I lived today.
Yeah.
Like I didn't get lived by anything. Like I lived. And that sense of control, that sense of agency, and that sense of autonomy is, I think we can design technology and digital technology in particular. And I think that AI helps with that. So that's my goal.
I think the point of saying I lived and getting back to that is something that we are truly missing. I can say that being a part of my generation, Gen Z is, when a lot of my friends hit the pedal, I can tell you right now, they don't feel like that. They feel like they got live. They were just online the whole time. They weren't actually enjoying that experience. And so I can tell you
Yeah.
firsthand, that's admirable that, you're shooting to actually make a difference and being one of those people to make that change. And so I think that kind of
Mhm.
follows up in my next question, which is how does OnLife separate itself from the rest of these apps that claim they're making a difference or are also trying to make a difference? I feel like it's more than just a calendar app, right?
It is. I mean, so the how I approach this is sort of from an engineering mindset, let's say, is is how to sort of mathematically model everyday life, right?
Mhm.
What does it mean to sort of live your daily life? Like if you're somebody that when you wake up in the morning and you're like, well, what do I have to do today, or what am I going to do today? That is, in computer science, that's like a search problem.
Mm.
That is, there is a potential combinatorial explosion of options, of like, hey, I could do any, there's like a near infinite number of options for me that I could do. And so, but that's not what happens to us. We don't consider every single option, run some algorithm, brute search algorithm that like over every single possibility. Instead, we have things like calendars, right? We have things like reminders and notes. We have certain commitments, that we've made. We have certain responsibilities and duties. And these are like heuristics that kind of prune down the option space. So when you really start asking people about their daily life and even their world, most people think of their lives as being incredibly complex. But in fact, what studies suggest and show is that actually people's worlds are quite simple. Um, Meaning that in a week you probably only have 2 to 4 locations that you even go to. Maybe your home, your school. You might go, I don't know, the gym. You might go to your girlfriend or boyfriend's house or something. You might go to the grocery store. And then if you extend that to a week, you're up to like maybe 5 to 8 places. And then once you get up to like the year, you think, well, actually, my world only comprises about uh, you know 25 locations. And so a map-based product is interesting because then you can look at that map and kind of see, okay, here's the kind of the radius of what my world is. And what I think is interesting is being able to then combine calendar and combine a map-based product. So imagine just, your calendar being on a Google Maps or on Apple Maps, and then your reminders and your to-dos, your tasks and all of that. It's looking at space and time on a map and then seeing my world on that map,
Mhm.
right? And so location data and spatial behavioral data then become very important for us because as I move around and just live in the world, what our models are trying to do is to understand that as you go to these different places, what does your being at that place tell us about you?
Mm.
So the obvious analogy here is you think of how many years, if you're on Facebook or TikTok, whatever it is, Instagram, how many years you've kind of trained the algorithms to have a personalized feed, right? And that's because of the clicks that you're, on the screen, you're clicking things. And the click is a multi-trillion dollar mechanism, that generates value. And so what I'm interested in is how do you think of the world, the physical world as the feed? And it's not really your clicks, it's just your very existence, just you moving around and being at the world, going here, going there. Those are the clicks. And then what the models are doing is then forming a kind of personal model of Christian, forming a personal model of Ryan. And and then with that model, it's able to then sort of make probabilistic um, nudges about, well, because Ryan likes, jazz music and Mexican food and art museums and bookstores and, you know, whatever else. Now, when he moves from LA and goes to Chicago or he goes to London, how do you map those interests to each city as you change spatial context? And what we all want to feel when we go to a new city is a sense of like, I have a sense of orientation. I know what's significant for me in this city. So then you can map the interest graph of you and your model in London,
Mm.
in Berlin, in Rome, in Miami, in San Francisco, wherever. As you're changing spatial context, what the models are trying to do is help you feel a sense of orientation, help the city show itself to you and say like,
Mm.
hey, here's the kind of things you're going to enjoy doing. I want you to engage with me. To
Yeah.
imagine the city having a personality or something. It's like, hey, I'm over here. Like, here's what you're going to want to do, right?
Yeah.
And so what the calendar and the notes, the reminders and the tasks and all that is trying to do is be a sort of a filter or a constraint, given that life can be incredibly complex in terms of all the options,
Yeah.
right? And so you're right. It's more than just a calendar. It's also more than just a map. What it's trying to do is be a new kind of spatial intelligence. Is that the how do you make the world kind of wake up to the fact that you're moving in it and have this kind of relationship with the world and not break that relationship by having a kind of
Mm.
separate it's like a separate dimension of reality that is this feed, and we treat the feed as more real than the reality. Most times the feed doesn't even point to or stand in for reality. It's not even
Yeah.
referencing the map isn't even referencing the territory,
Yeah.
right? So what I'm interested in is just getting rid of that type of design interface and using a maps interface as a way to kind of make me look at the map and say like, oh wait, I'm in the world already. There's a world out there that I'm connected to,
Yeah.
and then how do you use AI and how do you use machine learning? How do you use neural networks, not to build another large language model or a chat interface that we again just stare at, but no, how do you have that brain or that intelligence underlying the map?
Yeah.
Is I
Yeah.
hope that makes sense, but
It does.
that's the unique, I think, perspective that we're bringing into. We're not building another LLM. This is not a large language model. Um, we can work with those large language models by based on what you do here. We have our own chat assistant called It's called Leslie in the app. And so when you ask the assistant questions, it can route to the models. So we have a pretty interesting router system. But no, it's designed to be, I wouldn't call it a personal assistant or something like that. It's not a coach or anything like that. It's designed to sort of be a smart map, an intelligent map to make the world intelligible to you. It does help you organize and structure your day. That's a big part of it. Maybe we can get into that a little bit about, some of the interesting people that have found our product in the beta state that it's in have found it incredibly useful to organize and structure their day and their life.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of what I want to dive into next, which is as a college student myself, I think having extra tools to organize your life makes life more comforting. And so that I do
Yeah.
have the time to enjoy things. And I think one of OnLife's strongest gifts that it has is those smart reminders because I don't have to
Mm,
constantly. It's kind of funny. I'll go on my phone. I'm going to check my reminders and be productive. The next thing I know, I'm scrolling on Instagram. It's been 10 minutes,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
how did I get there? I tell myself, how did I get there? I don't know what
yeah, yeah,
happened, right? And so having the smart reminders takes that out of the equation. I don't have to go fully into the app and do all
yeah,
that. I can just see the reminder. Okay, I got a meeting in 30 minutes. I got a test in 30 minutes. I got to do study for my work. And so as a college student, I think it's very significant in the help that it's already providing me. And just talking to a lot of my
yeah,
peers, they also see that vision. And
yeah.
so, what I'd like to ask you is when you first created OnLife and you had the idea of OnLife, did you see it as an initiative to help college students as well, or do you see it as more of a wide reality? And how do you feel about the fact that college students are some of the most, most distinctive people that are being helped right now by OnLife?
Yeah, I think so. I think the two groups that have shown the biggest interest in what we're doing, not just the interest, but the two groups that have, I mean, more importantly, found value in what we're doing. Right, it's helping them. The two groups are college students, and I think that's, I mean, we all, if when we go to university and where we've got classes, we've got our social life, we've got our kind of extracurricular activities of I'm trying to stay in shape, or I'm in theater, or my church, my whatever it is that you've got going on, reading group, my work. um, I think a big problem that people have is that feeling of overwhelm, the feeling of being burnt out, and a general sense of like, I just don't know how to get it under control. And to our point earlier, that if you sort of outsource organization to like six different apps, well, each one of those platforms is optimizing for something very distinctive, right? And so your attention kind of gets fractured into all these different directions, and therefore you don't have any kind of unification, or you don't feel a sense of identity or like a consistent narrative in your life. And so they might be designed to help you feel organized, but they tend to do the opposite, right? And it's like you're pulled in, and so your attention, of course, is going to be the length of the attention of a goldfish, um, because what am I supposed to pay attention to? You
Yeah.
know. So if we can't learn how to get help in like, okay, how do I organize and structure my day properly? And I think the general sense that people have is maybe that they can't find the right help, to do that.
Mm.
And that's one of the core essential points of the app that we've built, is that it's helping you visualize your day. Normally, how we plan and structure our days is with some kind of a calendar,
Mhm.
right? And so when I look at my calendar, I just kind of have this two-dimensional block, and then in that is a list of like, oh, I've got a meeting with Christian, and then I've got a meeting with you know Sarah, and then I've got this, and da, 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 and then I've just got this list. And
Mhm.
it kind of reduces, I think, the day to this box. And so I think that what has been very helpful for people is to be able to visualize all your appointments that you have, and the meetings and whatever that you have, on a map. So I kind of see, okay, I got to go here, and then I've got like 10 minutes to be here, and then I've got, it's why people find these airplane or airport apps very useful. Like Flighty, for example, is like,
Mhm.
okay, I land at 6 o'clock, and then I've got 1 hour to get to the terminal. But most of us don't have a sense of like, well, what terminal am I landing in, and what terminal am I departing from, and what route do I have to take to get from here to there? And these apps are huge lifesavers, stress reducers, and overwhelm reducers, because they literally map out for you the best course of action to get from A to B.
Yeah.
The problem you're optimizing for is, how do I catch my flight? And there's all this noise here. How do I overcome that? And that's what they solve for, right? And so that's what I want to figure out how to do, is how we can continue helping college students solve that problem of like, again, how do I get a sense of autonomy and agency and control over my own life, and help reduce stress, help reduce, not reduce options, but help get control of the options,
Mhm.
so that I'm in a better position to get my stuff done. Right.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand is the neurodiversity community. So a lot of people that I mean, and these overlap obviously in many ways. Um, is the ADHD community and the autism community, and there's other people using it that in the addiction and recovery space, and that has been incredibly interesting. I think is seeing that like we didn't intentionally set out with that in mind to build a product for the neurodiverse community. But as it happens, maybe it says something about me. But as it happens, the product that we designed was one that seems kind of perfectly suited for how the neurodiverse communities map the world.
Yeah.
And what we have been told is that they very much appreciate and find a lot of value in looking at the world spatially, looking at their day spatially, and sort of seeing kind of the more holistic vision of the day as a kind of movement in the space. And so those two groups have found what we're doing incredibly valuable. And that's where I think like I feel very good about what we do because again, we're not doing like, hey, look at more content. Um, look, this, I'm going to flip the bottle and see if it lands on the, like that's fine. People can do that. But like, again, I'm more interested in how do we design new types of systems and new technology in a way that actually helps people get stuff done. It helps us be more productive. It helps us exercise more agency, and it helps us become and achieve more autonomy in terms of how we're living our daily lives. I think that's for me, that's the key. And so far in the early stages of the beta, college students have found it helpful for organizing their day. And the neurodiverse community has also found it very useful and valuable for organizing their day. But also, I think the interface design itself, of being map based, I think it really helps people get a sense of their day as more holistically.
Mhm.
Like I do recall asking some questions to people when they were first using the app of like, how do you think about a day? What is a day? What does that even mean? And most people would think that like, oh, I just think of a day as like a checklist. But really, I just think of a day as like a giant monster that's just like this, like, I can't control, it's this uncontrollable like monster that I'm always trying to harness or I'm trying to capture in some sense. And I just feel like I can't. Hence, I feel stressed and overwhelmed and burn out all the time.
Yeah.
And then the question is, well, like, okay, great, but how can we change the framework of how we think about what a day is? And for me, it was how do we think of the day as sort of like a Duolingo lesson,
Mm.
that it is kind of this journey from A to B or A to Z, let's say. And Z is like, again, me lying in bed at night and thinking like, okay, I won. I won the lesson. I
Yeah.
won today. How could you design a day like that? And I think that the best way to do that would be, at the beginning of the day is being able to say, again, like in sort of engineering language, like, what am I optimizing for?
Mm.
What's the point of the day? Another, like, or another way of saying it easier, I guess, would be what's the goal of today?
Yeah.
What's my utility function? A nerdy way of saying it, right? What the hell's the point of this day? What am I trying to do? And now I can look back and say, okay, well, if that's the point of the day, then how am I going to design my day?
Yeah.
What do I need to do? What's the algorithm? What are the steps that I need to do in order to achieve that outcome?
Mm.
And I don't think most of us look at the day this way. I feel like we just kind of wake up, we improvise, and then like a bit through the day, we're like, oh crap, this is a lost day. Like, what am I doing? You know? And so that's what it's designed to do is kind of, in that sense, be a kind of assistant or a template even of trying to help people, keep their day optimized, keep it on track to what it is you're trying to accomplish. And so then you can borrow from, a Snapchat streak or a Duolingo streak. And I find that more impressive. Like, okay, it's great that you have a Duolingo streak of 500 days, but imagine you had a streak of like getting 80% of your stuff done and winning each day for 2 years.
Yeah.
And so that is at least helping you build up a habit, build up the ritual, build up the everyday, kind of rhythm of being on top of my day,
Yeah,
right? And so those are the two groups that have found it, I think, most valuable, and we continue to work as closely as we can with them and get their feedback on the beta, um, to see, what are some additional features that could make it even more valuable for them.
absolutely. And to me, that feels like living in the moment, really, and giving
Yeah,
you the ability to live more in the moment and be more conscious and really take in the things around you and the people around you because you don't have to worry. Have that little, just that little bit of stress shaved off of worrying about
yeah,
what am I going to be doing later in the day? Like what do I have to do here? It'll remind you
yeah.
and it will tell you. You don't have to worry about that little extra thing. And I think that goes a long way, especially because life is already so stressful as it is. And so
That's right.
I think that's very significant. And you were mentioning the positive feedback we've been having with students and the neurodivergent community. But on a deeper level, can you kind of tell me about the positive feedback from investors and kind of what they're telling
Mm.
you when you're going to them with OnLife from that standpoint?
Yeah, so I think, it's an AI company. So obviously, if anybody's been paying attention, AI is, it's a booming opportunity space. I mean, it's probably a bubble for sure. But the way that I like to look at the opportunity for investors would be another way of describing kind of the online offline dichotomy, the binary there. Um, and just to quickly give an overview of how I see the current industry is that the online side of things over here are LLMs. And these are these incredibly innovative, powerful, rich companies like, Anthropic and OpenAI, Perplexity. Obviously, there's products like DeepSeek. I mean, there's thousands now of models, but it's kind of a OpenAI, Anthropic world when it comes to these frontier labs and these foundational models like their large language models. And why I call them online models is because how those models work when they are released is before they're released to the public, they're doing training, right? And what they're training on is what I call digital modalities. What are they training on? They're training on images, they're training on text, they're training on audio and video,
Mhm.
right? And so those four modalities, they're called, those four things, those are what those models are training on to build up their knowledge base. And then later, when they're done with that, they're fine tuned by those companies. And then they're released to the public. And then we know them as ChatGPT 5 or O Mini or whatever, right? And so one of the things that I think is missing from this is that what these companies are trying to do is obviously they want to build successful businesses. Um, but one of the things that they're doing is they're trying to build what's called AGI, artificial general intelligence, or super intelligence, or whatever you want to call it. Basically, the idea here is not, I don't think, too much of like a matrix scenario or something like that. I think the general idea is that what we're building is this kind of intelligence as a service, right? It's like there's this kind of intelligence there, which is what the cloud was for a while, right? So we can access the cloud and use the cloud for various things. And now it seems like there is this reasoning model, this intelligence that we can access and use, right? And so they are operating in kind of the pure digital online space. I see very little overlap in the real world, in the physical world, right? So that's the online side of things. And if they're trying to build something like general intelligence, I think that what's obviously the case is that intelligence is not only the prefrontal cortex, right? It's not only reasoning, it's not only logic, it's not only, symbol crunching.
Mhm.
And so there seems to be something missing. And so the question is, what is it? Right? Enter the offline side, the other side, which is what they're calling world models. And actually, the head of, I guess, former head of Meta's AI, he runs a lab called FAIR. His name is Yann LeCun. He's a French kind of one of the kind of founding fathers of a certain branch of AI called machine learning and neural networks. Um, And his approach is that actually what makes one very foundational component of intelligence is something that is pre-linguistic and it's pre-conceptual. And that means that if you have a 8-month old child or something that can crawl from one side of the room to the other and pick up a ball and drop it 2 or 3 times, that means that what they have is a model of the world such that they know that I can go from here to there. And I have enough sense of the physics that I can reach out and objectively locate that object, pick it up. And while they don't have a sense of gravity or something like that, they're able to let go and sort of, make sense of that. Okay, there's some kind of a causal relation between me doing this and. So it's not that they're not speaking and reasoning about this. There seems to be this kind of um, uh, inherent physics engine that is intelligence, because it's intelligence really is nothing, not nothing more than, but my definition of intelligence is that it's correct movement through a constrained space.
Mm. Mhm.
And that's photosynthesis would be intelligent behavior. Heliotrope, a tree moving to better access the sunlight would be intelligent behavior, right? It's not conscious. I think it's being like, you know what, I'm not really digging this location. I'm going to go ahead and make that move. It's like, of course, it's kind of baked into its structure and its nature, but nonetheless, that's an intelligent move, right? And so, what Jan LeCun and the world models are trying to figure out is how you capture that kind of physics engine, and what that's relevant for is robotics, and it's relevant as well for self-driving cars, autonomous driving. And I'm in LA right now. I know you're down in San Diego. We're seeing the Waymo cars, and in Texas, and I think also in San Francisco now, we're seeing the Tesla robo taxis,
Mhm.
driving around. A lot of people have self-driving on their Teslas and all that kind of stuff. So very, very powerful and valuable use cases there. So these are kind of I think the two approaches. And then in between there is what I'm interested in. And so again, the Onlife idea here is we're not online LLM, we're not offline world models. What we are is Onlife. And Onlife is what I call a life world model. And that is, I'm not doing artificial general intelligence. I'm almost doing artificial, like, specific intelligence.
Yeah.
I'm interested in how I can apply and understand intelligence to Christian, to Ryan, because LLMs understand how humanity thinks and writes and reasons, but LLMs don't understand how a human thinks and writes and reasons, how
Yeah.
one specific human does it,
Mhm.
because they've trained on kind of the general, database of humanity online. But me specifically, how can it train on me and my movement? And so the life world here is trying to imagine reality, physical reality, as something like a neural network. And that means, home, grocery store, these are all kind of nodes in the network. And how I get to one of those could be a bike, I could walk, I could drive, I could, helicopters, I don't know. So I could fly there, right? So like all those nodes are connected, and that's a network. And my movement in that network then um, can be modeled as a neural network. And then you can
Yeah.
apply that network, and that model can then learn. And
Mm.
then you can apply machine learning to that, right? So that's how I kind of look at the industry, and why I think this is interesting is because before, if you remember, I mentioned those 4 different modalities of text, image, audio, and video. And what I think is missing is the spatial modality, the spatial data, the location kind of movement data. And that's where I think the next opportunity is. And what the world model or life world model does in that more specific way is, I think it gets us closer to having personalization, having context, and also importantly, having memory. And to me, the next phase of AI and generative AI is going to be how we do personalization, how we do memory, and how we do context without kind of faking it, which is basically what's happening now. And I
Yeah.
think if you can get those right, then what that can also help you do is figure out how to be more efficient. And so to me, those are kind of the four core variables of what happens next in AI is how do you do personalization? How do you do memory? How do you get these things to be more efficient? And how do you bring personal context into it?
Yeah.
Right. So those four things. So to bring it back to the question about investors, I think investors are finding what we're doing interesting because I think it's a genuinely new approach to filling out what's kind of the overall um, module of intelligence. Obviously, Anthropic and OpenAI, and as we've seen, if we looked at the Pixel 10 event, and then last year I was in Cupertino and did some stuff there for Apple Intelligence, which isn't too intelligent yet, but Apple will get there. Right. So you've got Google, you've got Apple, you've got Anthropic, and you've got OpenAI. They're all going to need to come eventually and reckon with the spatial aspects.
Mhm.
And when we look at Google and Apple, they have obviously Google Maps and Apple Maps respectively. And we saw some very interesting things that happen locally on this device, the Pixel 10. And so that's what I think that's what investors are seeing, and that's interesting to us. Interesting with our company and our approach is clearly this is where it's going. How do we help these guys build something really special?
Yeah.
And that infusion of capital there. And so I think the challenge at the moment is, I think a bit of a reckoning is happening where, like I said, you've got these huge AI companies that have just insane gobs of money. And then a lot of these companies, these startups that have come out are just nothing more than API wrappers.
Mm.
And I talked about it before we started recording, but like they're API wrappers. I mean, they've built a neat little UX UI around it, and then really they're just pinging OpenAI. They're just pinging their models or pinging
Yeah.
Claude. And why the cost structure of this becomes challenging is it looks great when you do a YouTube demo for like one person.
Hmm.
One person's using it, but obviously that's not the goal as a founder. You want to have hundreds of millions of people using your product. So if any of these products that are just doing API calls to these excellent models, and you have a look at the price structure, like some of them are affordable, but if you can't develop like an intelligent routing system, that kind of understands what the prompt is and can classify the prompt um, sufficiently well, and then route it to the most efficient model. If you can't do that, well, then you're kind of always stuck in somebody else's pricing structure.
Hmm.
You're always stuck within somebody's pricing strategy. And I believe that prices will get more and more more and more cheaper, obviously, but like we're not there yet. And I think that's a big reason why we haven't, other than like people that are building their products as like tools for developers and kind of more, I think, developer creator tools and like more enterprise use cases. We haven't really seen any successes in like the Gen AI like consumer space,
Mm.
like things that are just like really blowing up. And like
Yeah.
Be Real did or something, like 2 or 3 years ago. I don't even know if it still exists, but Be Real kind of blew up, and then like you had all these things like grow really, really fast. Obviously there's ChatGPT and Claude. I'm obviously aware of that. I just mean that companies that are kind of wrapping something up as hits to the API, those models, we haven't really seen any like big successes.
Yeah.
And so I think the reckoning here is going to be that a lot of those companies, unfortunately, are probably going to wrap up. Pun intended, I guess. But and then I think what we're trying to tell investors is we think this is kind of the next phase of it.
Yeah.
The next phase of it is going to try to figure out, well, how do we make those API hits, more efficient? And what the personal world models try to do is, again, reduce the complexity in any prompt that you give to our model. Any prompt that you give to our assistant, Leslie, in the app. What it's doing is taking your world model, combining it with the prompt to improve it, and then it cuts down on the prompt engineering that has to happen, where it's like I ask it something, it gives me a response, and I'm like, well, that's not, I don't really like big chain, Mexican restaurants and coffee shops. I want something more da da da. Then you can enter, and it's like, and it gives you this, and you're like, yeah, but I don't like, blah blah blah. And so it takes like 4 or 5 steps. But again, that's expense and that's compute and that's energy that's being used throughout all that. If you could somehow, with what we're doing, take that, I know that Christian only goes to like boutique coffee shops or only prefers these types of things. And then that model augments the prompt, that behind the scenes, it's kind of already formulated the prompt in the way that it knows you. And then it goes to a model. And now the model can return with the specific kinds of things contextually that it already knows that you would like. And then I
Exactly.
cut down on all that waste in those 5 or 6, turns that were
Mhm.
taken to get to what I want.
Exactly. And that in itself is the efficiency aspect that
Yeah,
you bring up. You know what I mean? And so
that's right.
that in itself is separating on life already. And what I really believe is when there's a product, that's one thing. But I think that the people at home, myself included, what's really important is who's making that product and why are they doing that. And
Yeah.
I know you have the people at home, this may be new to them, but you have a PhD in philosophy. And I wanted to ask you, how has philosophy helped you in your journey in creating On Life? And how significant has that been, in learning those and learning that ulterior way of thinking? Because a lot of people don't understand what philosophy is. They don't understand, the way of life it has and it gives you. And so I think that's a really important aspect of just for you, Ryan, what it's done for you relating to On Life.
To me, philosophy has been really everything, in how I do this. It's like if you're in academia, you work in a university, or you're a researcher or something like that, and you go to all these different conferences, and you present a paper or you submit a paper somewhere, um, and you compare that to the reach of like Mark Zuckerberg, or you know Larry Page and Sergey Brin with Google, or Apple with Tim Cook and Steve Jobs, and just the billions of people that they reach. And then you really think about these products and they're the CEOs of these companies. What I realized was that actually, when you listen to Steve Jobs talk, when you listen to Larry Page or Sergey Brin talk, when you listen to Mark Zuckerberg talk, if you listen to Elon Musk talk, if you listen to any of these founders that have started a company, um, agree with it or not, you can't escape the fact that they all have a pretty robust worldview of how they think the world has worked and why it didn't work well and how it should work.
Mm.
And I think when we look at philosophy, what we see, and depending on, I'm sorry, regardless of who you're reading, there's a similar structure there of like is and should, that, pick any, your favorite philosopher, let's say, Nietzsche or something, would be like assessing the state of things and saying, hey, I think this is not optimal. There's something rotten, in Europe, or there's something rotten in the world. And here's the should. Here's how it should work. And then I'm going to present arguments in a position defending how I think it should work
Yeah.
in domains like, how do we know things? What is it to be ethical and moral? What's the nature of reality? What is wisdom? What is justice? These types of things, right? And so, in that sense, I think what I noticed was I want to do things that have an impact. I want to create something that matters and that improves people's lives and helps people. And writing a paper or writing a book, you know, uh, doesn't seem to be. I'm not saying it's irrelevant. Books are some of the most important things in my life, but it can't be the core means through which you communicate your ideas. And then my question was, well, what is? And then it seems like, well, the most powerful, influential people in the world, it seems that the new book is the product,
Mm.
the products that they're building and releasing to the world. There's a
Yeah.
whole social theory baked into Facebook. There's a whole governance theory of governance in Facebook. There's a notion, a position of what it means, what identity means,
Mhm.
how something, all of these things are baked into these products. And so for me, I think you can't help but do philosophy if you build a great product, or even if you build a crap product. you're still, to me, doing philosophy.
Yeah.
And I think, moreover, what I find interesting is that I think what certainly is consistent across the most popular products and companies is that it's not as if they, what these companies do is they hire psychologists, they hire economists, they hire anthropologists, they hire, cognitive scientists, they hire entomologists, and so they hire the best thinkers in all these spaces from the academy, and then they work with them and they help them. So if you're going to build anything of importance or impact, you better have a pretty robust theory of human nature,
Yeah.
right? And so again, the philosophical tradition, the theological tradition, the humanities in general, along with the sciences, has generally been okay. Well, what is this strange creature? The human being. What is this thing? And so I just think that my training and my interest and my experience within philosophy and the humanities has allowed me to try to, I think, better understand, yeah, how do you model human behavior in these products, and then, because we've been talking a lot about binaries and kind of being in between these binaries, is like, the humanities or philosophy, like, and science or engineering over here. And that's where, again, why I love building products and being in the startup world, is that the best do those things simultaneously. They
Yeah.
unify the humanities and the sciences, the engineering and the compute. So yeah, I think philosophy, the best definition of philosophy for me is a guy named Wilfrid Sellars. He was an American philosopher. And he said that philosophy is about how things, in the most general sense, hang together in the most general sense.
Mm.
And why I like that is because this is how I look at disagreement. It's how I look at what it means to be in the world and to be part of a world and move in a world. Is that you're trying to figure out how things relate and the nature of how things relate to each other.
Yeah.
And so how we move in those relational fields, let's say, is that we're always trying to accomplish things. We have goals we're trying to reach and achieve, and we're using things in our network to try to help us get there. And so how things hang together in the sense of, like, how does all this make sense in terms of what I'm trying to achieve?
Yeah.
So that's how philosophy has been impactful for me, is what does it mean to be in the world?
Yeah.
What is a world? What does that mean? How do we move in the world, and then how do you kind of model that?
Yeah.
And that's I think, a philosophical instinct that's kind of at the base of every domain of inquiry, whether it's physics or you know uh, computer science or psychology, cognitive science, neuroscience. I think is how you understand the nature of the behavior and why, and how you model it.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that reflects with OnLife very well in
Yeah,
helping you be in the moment and live in the moment. And I think that that all correlates together and all comes full circle. And so I think that's a great place to end. And I think that this has been very informative. I really appreciate your time, Ryan. I think that we definitely need to continue to do this. I think it's super
yeah.
fun and super informative for all the viewers at home as well. And yeah, is there anything else you'd like to say before we
I would
close
just
up?
say that it probably got a little bit abstract, and maybe in some places, and perhaps we could do that would be useful for people is supply some links
Mhm.
to some articles if they want to go deeper into this. Not to only promote my own stuff, but I have a Substack page where I've written a lot about many of these topics, and so
Yeah.
for anybody who wants to get a little bit deeper, that maybe they find something we said interesting, they can uh, go deeper, learn a little bit more about it.
Yeah.
But we can also link to any kind of relevant books if people want to listen more, or podcasts, or maybe there's other videos that aren't ours that would help people, dig a bit deeper.
Yeah.
A lot of this is we're all still trying to understand, how what this all means, the AI stuff, and what it means for jobs, what it means for our own agency and autonomy, and what it means for knowledge and work and job. Like it's things are just moving so fast
Mm.
that I think it's the only thing that we can do is help treat people try to find uh, a home in this, right? Is how do we understand it? Where do I fit into it? How do I model this weirdly complex space that
Yeah,
every day seems to change? And so I think one of the things we can do is at least help people find avenues to explore and with more depth if they want.
I love that. I love that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm totally with that. So I appreciate you,
Yeah.
Ryan. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, no problem.
And
Let's
we'll
do it
talk to you
again.
later. Have a good one. Sounds good. See you
Yeah.
later, guys.